right, cool. All right, I guess we'll get started then. All right. Welcome everybody. This is episode 27 of Storycomic Presents, and we have us here in the studio. We have Bill Coulombe from ycomics.net, but he's here. He's been here. We're going to be talking to him about his new upcoming, the Kickstarter that's in process right now, and you can find that at kineticcomics.com. We're here to sit down and talk to Bill about, just to kind of talk a little bit about how he came up with the idea of this comic book series. This is the second arc that we're going to be talking about today. He's had issues 1 through 8 already for Kinetic, and now we're going to be talking about Kinetic Identities. And so welcome, Bill. It's great to have you here. We're excited to dive in and listen and learn your skills and learn about what it takes to make a successful comic book like this. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bill. And Bill, kind of, if you want to, just talk to us how you got first started getting into making comic books in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't oversell me. I'm just a guy who makes comics. So guys, my name is Bill. I am the writer and creator of Kinetic. Kinetic Identities #1, which is our second volume 2, is basically out now live on Kickstarter. I got started seriously writing comics, probably about 2010, 2011. I said, this is something that I really want to do. And back then, I had written a couple scripts that I wish I had them on me. I can never find them. I only have like 2 hard copies somewhere buried in boxes in the closet somewhere. But I had written these scripts, didn't really go anywhere. And one day back in, I think it was 2012 or 2013, I just had the idea that Kinetic would be a cool name for a superhero. And I wrote it down. It was just on my mind. Nothing came of it until probably later on, about 2015, 2016. And that was when I said, if I don't do this seriously, when am I going to do it? So I sat down and I said, okay, well, what would Kinetic be? What would his powers be? Came up with the characters. Next thing you know, I had a script, and then I had a book, and then I had a full series. And now we're going into a second full series.
So when you first started, you mentioned in some previous podcasts, you basically kind of created a team when you put this together. It kind of started off with, finding your Raphael Cristani. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Yeah. Raphael Cristani.
Raphael Cristani. You found him through some online forums and you connected with him. And then from there, you also got looking for colorists. You said you had about 100 or so colorists that sent in applications to portfolios to you.
Yes, that was fun.
Letter. Yeah. And so, and that's some great advice we can kind of jump into a little bit later. But I guess also from folks that are listening to this who are were in your position now that where you were 5 or so years ago, how hard was it to kind of get a team that you could work with and that you can trust, and you actually had a pretty good cohesion like that?
Yeah, the hardest part about it, I think, especially nowadays, because the internet makes everything so simple. Like I said, I was looking for a colorist, and I put an ad up on I think it was Digital Webbing, saying, hey, I'm looking for a colorist. I had in my inbox, within a couple days, like 100 entries. So it's very easy to find people, and there's no shortage of good artists who are looking for work. On the flip side of that coin, it's kind of getting to trust them that you just brought up. That's tough, because we hear horror stories all the time, and on both ends, of an artist who did a bunch of work and then never got paid. Or a writer who paid up front, and then halfway through the book, the artist disappears. I think with me, it's just about, you got to be, I don't want to say overly careful, but just do a little research on who you're working with. If they have stuff out, you might want to reach out to who they've worked with in the past and just say, hey, is this guy good for it? Does he get on? Can he meet a deadline? Is he not going to disappear on me? And I don't want this to turn anyone off from actually following your dreams and doing something like that. But just be aware of who you're working with.
And do you have? So how does that work? Because now this is your team, right? These are the folks. This is your letterer. This is your colorist. This is your line art. Yeah, so it's like basically almost like the four of you, correct?
Yes. And so I write my scripts as full script. And that basically means it's broken down panel by panel and it says, hey, panel 1, this happens. Panel 2, this happens. But in the scripts, I make sure to add for the artist because the general public isn't going to read your script. So what I add is, and I think Brian Michael Bendis of Superman and Marvel fame, he put it best in his book where he says, hey, they're your collaborators, not your art monkeys. And so I always just say, hey, if you see we have the panels A, B, C, D. If there's 4 panels and you say, I think it will work better, flipping C and B around, or maybe we need to add an extra panel to kind of understand what's happening, I always give them that authority.
Oh, that's interesting. So how much in your series then? So this is a side question I wasn't thinking about asking, but now I'm really curious. How much of that in say, issue 1 or 4 or 8 that, say for instance, that Lucas came back to you or Omi said, it would work a heck of a lot better if you do this or switch that. How many great ideas or how many great images that you thought about that you wanted in there just never made it because of your other teammates who suggested to completely change something?
I usually think it is the other way around, that I have images in my mind of what a page is going to look like. And then sometimes I will get especially with Raphael, when I got one of the first pages back, it didn't look anything like I expected it, but it looked so much better. So I said, and Omi usually is pretty good. He colors everything, and there's not too much at his point that he ever needs to change around. With Lucas, who is my letterer, he adds all the dialogue and all the credits and stuff. I have had a couple conversations with him going back and forth, and he's been doing lettering for longer than I've been doing the comics production. So there's sometimes that he comes up with something and he says, hey, I'd rather the word balloon shouldn't be here. We should put it over here. And he's I try to be aware, and so does my artist. Hopefully your artist is aware. But I try to be aware just of, the dialogue placement. And sometimes there's too much dialogue for one panel, so it gets split into 2. Mm-hmm. Or it's slight movements like there. But what I always say is, if at the end of the day, the reader is the most important person. So it's most important that the reader understands what's happening, and also that it's just telling the story correctly.
And so talk to us a bit about for folks that are listening or watching would say, okay, this is, tell me a bit about Kinetic. Tell me about the Kinetic universe of it. So, what is the back of the cover, summary on what Kinetic is?
Yeah. So I make the sales pitch for Kinetic super simple. Okay, imagine that you're developing superpowers, but there's one problem. Your city already has a hero. And that hero's kind of a jerk. He doesn't really care. So you think you can do a better job. And it becomes kind of a superhero turf war.
And where did your idea, because I know you said in some previous things, you kind of came up with the idea of Kinetic a long time ago, at least the name itself. How did you flesh out the powers, and how did you flesh out the kind of the meta plot for that?
Yeah, so like I said, this all started because I thought Kinetic would be a cool name for a hero.
Yeah.
So building off of that gives you a lot of leeway for what's actually going to happen and what actually the powers are. So I had an idea, I'm like, okay, I want him to be able to come up with this kinetic energy that you can see behind me. He's coming out of his fist. His powers are actually, he's able to create and manipulate kinetic energy. So originally it was, when he punches, he can use that energy to help get a little extra oomph. He can shoot beams from it, what have you. But it was funny because I didn't come up with a way to put it so concisely in one sentence when I first started out. So if you met me at one of my first conventions I did, say Central City Comic Con in Wenatchee, Washington, or a Yakima, Washington, or just one of the super small shows when I was first starting out, I couldn't give you like a straight answer. Like I would give you just this long rambling answer like, oh yeah, he could create energy. And then eventually I had to sit down one day and say, okay, what can he do? As far as plot wise, and for those of you who haven't read the book, the main antagonist, the hero who's a jerk, he's the Ascender. He's kind of an Iron Man type with a suit of metal. We did everything when we were designing it to be like, hey, it's not Iron Man, it's not Iron Man. But at the end of the day, it's a guy in a suit of metal. So it's like, all right, it's Iron Man. But he's kind of an Iron Man type. And I thought it was kind of always interesting, like machinery versus magic, kind of a little take on that. Yeah. And at the time, Civil War had been out, but Captain America Civil War, the movie, and heroes versus heroes in the cinema hadn't really taken off yet. And I always really liked that kind of heroes versus heroes vibe.
Right.
So I wanted that. But then, of course, to get him into action, we have his brother. And one of the things that I'm really proud of with the series is just that there's kind of an ensemble cast. That we have his coworkers and his brother, and they're very kind of the core people that he hangs out with are kind of very fleshed out. At least I like to think so. Somebody could say otherwise, I guess. But his brother ends up getting hurt by this psychopath who's out on the streets, and what sparks it off that makes Johnny say, "Hey, I can do a better job," is his brother just gets hurt, and Sender's flying right by. And, they're yelling out, help, help, we need help down here. And he just flies by. He doesn't care.
Yeah. And you had, so as you mentioned earlier, you kind of have some good supporting cast. Is there, do you have like a wiki or something that people can click on to say, learn more about characters or anything like that yet?
Not yet. It's a great idea to come up with it. To be honest, I'm not too tech savvy. So it's something that I would love to do. Just I would need to find the time to do it.
Yeah.
The time and know-how to do it.
So when you finished your first arc, you had issues 1 through 8 of Kinetic. And what was the time period between that and also doing this Kickstarter for Kinetic Identities?
So we started doing conventions in earnest in 2018. I want to say actually my first convention that I did was October 2017. And in 2017, I just did 4 shows. It was 2 in October, 2 in November. And they were smaller local shows. But it was kind of the soft release. I only had issues 1 and I think 2. I think I may have had 3 at the very last show that I did that year. And then 2018 was just going around doing the conventions in earnest. And then 2019 was even more. 2019, I shotgunned myself out everywhere. In that time, by the time 2019 came around, my entire goal 2019 was to sell down the stock I had of issues 1 through 8. And in November, that was when we had the Kickstarter. October, November, we had the Kickstarter for the trade paperback. And the trade paperback, obviously 1 through 8 all put into one book. And we just started doing the Kickstarter now for Volume 2. for what will essentially be, it's Kinetic Identities number 1, but really it's Kinetic Identities 9.
So talk to us about that when you mentioned when you're putting the books together. There is what did you find? How did that process go where you actually published like your first comic book? Who put the book together for you? Was that you, or did you have somebody else do that for you?
No, the books were printed through a firm called Print Ninja.
Okay.
Print Ninja is, and there's a couple different printers out there. It's the service they offer. Just basically, you give them the digital files and send it off to them. And with Print Ninja, they are based out of Chicago, but they actually deal with the Chinese printers overseas. So you get the nice customer service of being able to call and talk to someone if you're having an issue or when you're beforehand. But you get the nice prices of overseas. And that was something that really, when I was first looking at everything, man, if it's the difference between like $1 per unit and $1.25 a unit, pay the extra quarter and print it locally. But it was the difference between, $1.25 a unit and like 25 cents.
Wow.
So it was definitely cost advantageous to print overseas.
Yeah. And did you have, and through that, did you, kind of sit down and kind of do a business, mock up to say, all right, listen, in order for this to happen, I need to make sure that I need to buy X amount of copies. And I need to make sure that, so was the decision based off of how many copies you sold was also part and parcel of how many, as you mentioned earlier, how many conventions you needed to go to or wanted to go to? Which one was the deciding of which part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was mostly price. And so to explain a little bit about how offset printing works. Okay, there's a couple different kinds of printing. You can either print on demand, which is basically if a customer orders one, someone will print one and then ship it out to them. And that is generally the most expensive way to do it because you're printing up one at a time. Mm-hmm. And then you can do digital printing, which is usually smaller batches, anywhere from 25 to a couple hundred, where it's printed off on a digital printer, which is a little bit of cost savings. But what we did was we went with offset printers. Now, offset printers are these gigantic machines that take up, a whole garage or more. So if you were getting one of these, if you were to get an offset printer yourself, they're a big, big machine. With offset printing, though, the way that it works is when you make I don't know exactly how it works, but basically you make a plate, or you make the plate, which is the template for how the pages are going to look. And it costs money up front just to make that plate. But it's less per unit when you actually start making them. Mm-hmm. So with offset printing, the more that you print, the less that they are per unit.
Okay.
I looked at, I crunched numbers for probably a week just looking at, okay, if I printed this much, it would be this much. But then you say, well, if I print 2,000, I may as well do 3,000 because they cost less. So the jump up from 2,000 to 3,000 is more. And my print runs for Kinetic were very optimistic. I would say that's the nice way of putting it. I printed off quite a few.
And I do want to let people know that to check it out though, that if they do go to ycomics.net, you do have a store there, and it looks like you do have a bundle for Kinetic issues 1 through 8 for a really good price on there too. So
yes, we have an online store, and remember that all prices include shipping on the online store.
Oh wow, really?
And,
okay.
Yes. And I think now with the Kickstarter going live, we have a digital and physical catch up for both of them too.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to get the new series and also the original 1 through 8, those are available.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And I did check out, and I did go through your store. You got some great stuff on there. You got t-shirts, you got some physical books. People can get their digital copies of these as well there.
Yes.
And it's, yeah, it's been fascinating to just, to go through here. So, as I said, everybody, do go to ycomics.net to check out any of that stuff. But, when we're going to talk more about your Kickstarter, check that out. That's at kineticcomic.com, and it goes straight to the Kickstarter as well. So,
the funny,
yeah.
sorry, I just you bringing up the t-shirts made me want to say something real quick. Because those t-shirts, I had those before I had the books. Because I was like, man, I want to find something that I understood. The first book was probably about halfway done. So I said, man, I'm going to print up these t-shirts. And just to have something to sell. And it was funny because I got them, and then a bunch of my friends and family were like, oh yeah, let's get some t-shirts. Let's get some t-shirts. So I was like, okay, cool. That sold down a little stock of them. And then I went and took them to the first conventions that I was doing. And I think outside of friends and family, I sold maybe 2 of them. So I was like, okay, well, these t-shirts aren't gonna do so hot. So I stopped taking them to the conventions because they were taking up table space, and I needed the space for my books because the line was expanding. And then the first one that I went to that I didn't have them, somebody came up and was like, "Oh, do you guys have t-shirts?" It's like, come on, man.
So talk to us a bit now about this Kickstarter that you're working on now. I think last time we checked, you made your goal, right?
Yes, we funded in actually just a little bit under a week.
Wow.
So that was amazing, and thank you if you're coming in and you pledged. Really appreciate it, man. It was kind of night and day from my last Kickstarter that I did for the trade paperback, because that trade paperback funded, I think, the last hours of the last day. And I was like, man, okay. And with Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. So if you don't make it, you get nothing.
Right.
And I was like, man, we're doing the last thing. And finally passed right by it. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, you've reached your goal. You still have 18 days as of this recording. You still have 18 days left for this. So congratulations on hitting your goal. That's always great news. It's almost that point where it's like you can kind of breathe a little bit easier.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I wanted to do with this campaign is because honestly, what I asked for, the $2,000, I set that as the goal specifically because I did not want to have a nail biter like last time. And obviously, anything that we overfund just goes to making more comics and to the print run and getting the artist paid. It's funny with doing this. Since I've started doing this, it seems like I'm the last person who gets any money in my pocket, because it was you pay the artist, you pay the colorist, you pay the letterer, you pay the printer, and then you pay the conventions.
Yeah.
And hopefully at the conventions you sell enough that you break even.
Yeah. So what was your strategy when you started doing this? I mean, you talked about, you kind of had a passion for this, and you wanted always to write this, and from there, and was it it was a strategy for you to go out and kind of go to as many conventions as possible? How would you say would you give that same advice to yourself, yourself 2 years ago that you would today? Would you still do that shotgun of going to all the conventions you possibly can to help promote the book, or would you do something different?
As far as practical advice for a creator, I am not. What's the best way to word this? I am not upset, and I do not regret doing the shotgun out to conventions, because it got me meeting people from all over the nation. It was nice to go out and just see America. With that said, though, there is cost involved in going out to conventions. Now, thankfully, almost all conventions that I went with, I made money. But man, when you go to a convention and you don't make money, there are certain conventions that I went to that I at the end of the day, you're tallying up the numbers and looking at the numbers and just saying, "Oh man, what's going on? Is this going to be good or not?" But I think definitely it was my biggest source of revenue. And then it's funny because this year was going to be the year that I kind of dialed down the conventions and moved more over towards Kickstarter and towards online sales. Because conventions are fun. but man, they take a lot out of you. And you're not doing like heavy, you're not lifting, doing heavy, hard labor, but it's 3, 4 days straight that you're just on your feet, talking with people and trying your best. I just saw. But one of my biggest regrets was not embracing Kickstarter and crowdfunding just a little earlier. When I was first starting out, I think it was about the time maybe Potato Salad Guy, who wanted to put up a Kickstarter, said, "Hey, I want to make potato salad for the neighborhood," and had like a $25 goal or something, and ended up raising thousands and thousands of dollars. And that had happened, and it just seemed too easy for me to say that somebody could say, "Hey, I want to make this cool series," and then they get the money, and then say, "Okay, bye, I'm gone. Thanks, guys."
Yeah.
And just disappear like that. And what changed my mind was a creator that I really respect and admire, Tyler James, who runs the Comics Launch podcast and also Comics Tribe, the publisher for them. Yeah. I was talking with him about it, and he's just like, "Well, hey, you're not gonna, you think it's easy for people to take the money and run, but are you gonna do that?" I was like, "No, I never do that." And he says, "Well, if you're not worried about it, maybe you should try it." And I don't know, that just clicked something for me. And I said, okay. I'm like, I wish I had embraced that a little bit earlier, because it's definitely, there's people on Kickstarter who they almost get their comics exclusively on Kickstarter.
Right.
And I mean, there's people that you'll meet there that they won't make it out to conventions. So it's just another storefront almost.
Yeah. And do you see, and also too, that's because you've done 3 Kickstarters, and do you see part of the benefit or challenge of doing a Kickstarter is that not only are you promoting the product, but you're also promoting yourself as the creator as well?
Yes. It's interesting because I think when you put a project up on Kickstarter, it's a lot of it is your fan base. So and yes, you're going to get people who are on Kickstarter who will come and gravitate towards what you're selling because they like the look of it, and people that are like Kickstarter junkies that will get it. But there's also most of the people who will back my projects are my fan base. And more specifically, Kinetic's fan base. Because you said I did 3 Kickstarters, but only 2 of those funded. My first Kickstarter I did was back in March of 2019 for a totally new series that was going to be called Time Nomad. It was going to be kind of like an all ages like time travel adventure series. And I just had this idea, and it's like, all right, let's put it up there. But the thing is that people don't know me for Time Nomad. Like, people know me for Kinetic. Right. And I actually got some people who messaged me and just said, "Hey, we're not interested in this new series, but when you do more Kinetic, let us know." And I think as a creator, a lot of people will say, how do I want to word this? I don't think it's uncommon for a creator, once they finish a project, to say, "Okay, well, I finished a project. Now I want to do something totally different. So this way people can see how versatile I am. I can do this. I can do that. Hey."
Right.
But when you're building yourself up as, the superhero guy or the horror guy, and then you do something totally different, it's going to be an uphill battle kind of getting known as that.
Right. So what made you decide as well to, instead of having this be Kinetic issue number 9, making it Kinetic Identities issue number 1? What was the reason behind that?
Yeah, that's I really didn't want to do that when I started. When I started out, there were so many things that I didn't want to do that now I find myself, now like when I started, I didn't want to do variant covers. Now we're doing variant covers. The short and simple answer for that is sales attrition. With comic books, a number 1 book is going to sell better than a number 2 book. You will see naturally about a 50% drop off just going from number 1 to number 2.
Right.
Because almost anyone's going to take a bite on number 1. but it's not everybody who will pick up number 2. And you can see with my sales numbers, it's about a number 1, and then number 2 is about a 40% drop. Then there's like just about a 10% drop for each next one. Not quite as much for 7 and 8. What helped me out a lot was bundling them up together. So usually when you see me at a convention, you can get number 1. You can get a price break at 4, but when you get all 8 of them, it's I try to make it such a good number that you say, "Oh man, I can't turn that down."
Right. And I know you did.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I did hear you mentioned in a previous interview is that, when you're going through all these conventions and you see like someone selling a really good comic, but they only have issue 1, and you're like, I don't know if they're going to make issue 2. I don't know how long it's going to take. And you mentioned that was a very specific goal for you, is to make sure that you had already, when you hired on your artist, you already had 5 issues already scripted out, correct?
Yes, I wanted to say like through issues 5 or 6, I was totally scripted, and then I knew where 7 and 8 were going to go, because I was terrified that what was going to happen was, and with an independent comic book, okay, we're not DC that's backed up by Time Warner and AT&T, who are able just to funnel money into whatever to make our dreams come true. We are funding this out of our pockets, or funding it with the generous backers who come to our Kickstarter, who come to our crowdfunding site, who back us, who come to our website and buy our books. So with that, there's a lot of creators that, and before I was making the books, I was going to comic conventions for probably 3-4 years, and in that 3-4 years, I've seen a lot of creators come and go just in that time.
Right.
That I see them at a convention one year, and then the next year I don't see them, and I say, "Oh, what's going on?" I should look these guys up.
Yeah.
And the website might be down, and even now with this new Kickstarter going, I was going through a bunch of my old contacts, and a bunch of websites are down. I'm sure with COVID-19, it's tough out there just doing freelance and doing this as a job.
Right. Yeah. You just had an office gremlin show up, walk past.
That's why we all tuned in.
Yeah.
For the wild stuff that happens live.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to us a bit about in order to keep kind of have that buffer in place. What was your production schedule? Was it you had every issue come out like quarterly, or do they come out? How did that work? You had your first 8 issues. How was that released?
Yeah, when we were going full steam ahead, it was about every other month. I couldn't make it quite every month, and I actually did a limited local release in the Seattle and Pacific Northwest. That was, we were going to release the one book every other month. And at the time, I wanted to say I had the first 3 issues done, and then 4 was already on the way. And that was just basically me going around to comic book stores and just being like, "Hey guys," and thankfully I knew almost everybody, because I already had been around buying from them, and just being like, "Hey guys, I got a new book coming out. I made a little press packet for them and said this." And the issue 1 was actually pretty successful, just going around to stores.
Right.
And then issue 2, a couple stores dropped off. Issue 3, a couple stores dropped off. And then by the end of it, I wanted to say there was only a couple stores that were still on board.
Wow.
But it's just because the first issue, almost anybody will. First issue you can sell to almost anyone, especially because there's a lot of people who will be like, "Oh, well, you don't know whether it's going to be the next Walking Dead."
Right.
So there's a lot of people who pick up those issue 1s thinking, "Okay, if one of these gets big, then we'll have that."
Right.
But then, same with the sales attrition. And then again, that goes back to the last question you just said. And sorry, now I'm rambling.
No, it's good, but it brings up the good point where what's the right answer? Like, dude, because as you said, and I 100% agree with you, is you go to those comic conventions and you just see issue number 1, and And I sit in the same seat as you by saying, I'm glad to see that, but if I come back next year, can I pick up issue 3? By then we have 4 more issues I'm going to pick up. So it's interesting to think that it's weird that if somebody buys that issue number 1 at those local comic shops, why are they not picking up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? That's, it's bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for it. The way that I did it was I just looked at how fast we could produce them. I said, what is something that I can release these consistently that I'm not going to end up like Image Comics in the early 90s where there was books that, would go 9 months with a book between books coming out.
Right.
And what was comfortable for me was to do it every other month. And the way that it worked out, it was kind of funny, just the way that the production schedule worked out or the printing schedule worked out was issue 1 and 2, we printed those together. And then issues 3 and 4, those got printed really close together. And then there was a little lull. And then 5 and 6 got done about the same times. And then there was a little lull. And then 7 and 8. So it was about, we send 2 books out. And then we had a couple months where nothing happened. And then we send another 2 books out. And then, well, not that nothing happened, but,
Right.
We're getting artwork back. We're getting everything finished.
Right. And you had, and you mentioned too that that you really wanted to find a good colorist that kind of represented kind of these really nice bold colors that kind of fit the style of your story. Was there ever a time where you decided during the process that, you know what, it's cheaper to do black and white? Did it ever come across in your creative process at all?
I definitely thought about it at the very, very beginning. I knew that I always wanted Kinetic to have color. I don't think doing it black and white, I mean, obviously it could be done, but I don't think it would be as good a book it is if I had done it in black and white. The biggest expense when you go from black and white to color is actually hiring on the colorist.
Oh,
because there's a whole nother person that comes on to get paid. And yes, there is a slight upcharge for printing, but it's not as much as you would think.
Okay.
Where the real potatoes there, the real meat and potatoes there is hiring just a whole nother person to a page rate to do the book.
Right. We had someone ask, is like, so other than the Kinetic, does Kinetic have, as you mentioned earlier, he does have the power to create, absorb, and release kinetic energy. Does he have any other type of superpowers as well?
We kind of based everything right around there. So, and when you start out in Kinetic number 1, Johnny, he's not like an expert of his powers when he first starts out. So what happens is the powers flared up once in high school. Now it's a couple years later, he's graduated, and they're coming back. And even Johnny doesn't know exactly what's going on. So we get to learn throughout that first arc the full extent of his powers. So it starts out that, he can punch super hard. He can realizes, hey, I can kind of do these beams. I can kind of make like a little shield thing. And we learn throughout it. And I think it ends at the end of 7 and 8. He starts learning how to harness that power to fly. And there's actually people who will come up to me at conventions or talk to me, and they say, by making it, he's able to create and manipulate kinetic energy. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with that. And I say, well, yes, there is. I look forward to being able to make a lot of more issues of this and just expanding the power base and see him get more confident with his powers and what he can actually do, like full force.
So how much of that research did you have a physicist friend that you called up and say, hey, give me a breakdown, just give me a crash course on kinetic energy?
No. And that's funny too, because I get people who are teachers, and I get teachers and just people who say, oh, well, is this based in real kinetic energy and real physics? And I'm just like, no, don't look into the math behind
it. And what about as well? What's your idea for this? Is there a is there a point where you're going to say, all right, I have 20 issues. I have 100 issues. Do you have a point where you're going to say, this is going to be the end of Kinetic's story? Or do you see this kind of open just like an ongoing comic book series?
I have kind of an ending scene, a little ending arc in mind, but it won't come at the end of this volume 2. It's, I don't know, just some inspiration is so funny and fickle that way that I just had this scene come to me and I was like, man, that's a really nice scene. So, you jot it down in your notebook. And I was thinking over, I was like, man, it would really be just a great like bookend and ending to Kinetic. I would be happy to write Kinetic until I feel that the story kind of closes itself off. But right now, I just am keeping it open.
Right.
The biggest thing is just I don't want to focus too far down the line by saying, volume 4 or volume 5 will be the end. I just want to say, hey, I'm going to focus on finishing volume 2, making volume 2 the best I can be. And then when and if we go into volume 3, I'll make it there. That was one thing, too, with Kinetic Volume 1, that issue 8. I made it so it was, if all that because I didn't know whether there was going to be a 9, 10, a volume 2. So I made it so, hey, it can end here. But I wanted to leave it open that we can still do more if we want to.
Right.
And I see Dell just had, where'd he get his power from? And also, is there a love interest? Yes, there is a love interest. And the powers, I kind of went the Tremors route with where did he get the powers from? He is the only superhuman in the world right now that we know of. He's the first to kind of develop these powers. And I kind of went the there's an old sci-fi movie comedy, Tremors. I kind of went the route with there's only a couple different places he can get his powers from. He could be an alien, he can be a government experiment, or a mutation. But the important part is he has the powers. But we will learn that later on.
Okay. And what about the love interest question?
And yes, he does have a love interest. It actually is explained out. We're introduced pretty early in that very first issue. And kind of fun to get to watch their love bloom, their feelings for each other get stronger.
Well, it looks like Dallas. It looks like you got a new fan who's probably going to be picking up your books now. So that's good. So talk to us about.
Dell, thank you so much for coming in, and thank everybody for coming in.
And we just had some just asked too. This is a good question. Are you coming out with a team book?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I want the universe. One thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to stick with. Hey, let's just focus on making Kinetic a really strong character.
Right. It's good, and
it's tougher with a team book because you have. I mean, if Kinetic gets bigger, if we get bigger and we keep making these books and we get more characters in them, I would not be against doing a team book.
Would you? No, this is the question I've asked previous guests. Is there a thought about making this almost kind of like an open source world where you will like let other writers to say, hey, yeah, if you want to go ahead and take a crack at this once you have something, or are you going to pretty much still keep this kind of tight to the vest and wanting to make sure that all aspects of the Kinetic universe is things that you want to make sure that you can maintain?
I'm not against bringing on another writer to do something. I have so far, we haven't done any crossovers or anything like that. The one thing that I kind of have, if the answer isn't hell yes, then the answer is a no. And there's been some other creators that I've talked to, and it's partly because I do so many conventions, and if you had trying to think of a superhero, like Toast Man, and the creator of Toast Man wanted to work with Kinetic, and it's part of what I think about too is, hey, well, is the creator of Toast Man, is he going out doing these conventions? Are we both going to hit everything? It's a lot. It's logistically a lot to do.
Right. So,
but no, I would not be adverse to doing a crossover or bringing on a writer. I think it'd actually be fun to bring on, a writer to do maybe a book or two and just see where they took it.
Right. So, talk to us now about your Kickstarter. Kind of walk us through this. What can people expect from it? What are the different tiers that people might be excited about?
1 second here. I'm actually going to bring it up on my deal. So our Kickstarter is live now through September 12th. And it is for Kinetic Identities #1. The easiest way, if you are on the computer right now, you can check it out by going to www.kineticcomic.com. That is the easiest way to get there. Oh, look, and you have it up too. One thing that's cool about Kinetic Identities #1, okay, if you have never read Kinetic before, okay, I have plenty of catch-up tiers, so you can get all the books together. But if you are not so inclined that you say, hey, I just want to read this issue 1, you can jump into this issue 1 without reading anything or knowing anything ahead of time.
And you have, you do. You have the digital catch up. You have that.
Yeah, we have digital catch up. There's a physical catch up. With this book, we're actually doing three different main covers. The main cover is the Raphael. It's the Luis Rivera cover. That's the one on the left there. Mm-hmm. Kind of the one with the background, the pinup that he's standing there. Okay, then we have 2 premium variants. Now, this is really cool because these are professional guys that came on and actually did these books.
Oh, wow.
And we're nice enough to do covers for me. The one in the center there is Jason Metcalf. And you can actually kind of see in the background, I know someone was Del was asking about the love interest. You can see in the background there, he's got his love interest kind of looking on. And then I also had, so Jason Metcalf, who did that cover, he's done a lot of work with Zenescope, with IDW. Last year, he just got hired on to do his first cover for DC Comics with Batman the Max Arkham Dreams miniseries. And then the one on the right is the Freddie Williams variant cover.
Oh, wow. And
Freddie Williams is the artist, penciler, and inker on Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, He-Man, Thundercats, and Injustice versus Masters of the Universe.
That's great. Yeah, it looks like you can go all up. Yeah, you got some great bundles on here too. Wow.
Yeah. Now, as you get up into the higher tiers, I want to say the $100 is the kind of the ultimate tier for that Freddie Williams and the Jason Metcalf. We're doing an ultra limited run of like virgin variant covers.
Okay.
So those, and they're black and white, and they have no trade dress on them. So it's just the black and white artwork.
Okay.
Then we have some cool higher end reward tiers. If you want the handwritten script, the handwritten rough draft that I wrote, that's available. And then you can also have yourself drawn into Kinetic.
Huh. Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's the first time that I've ever offered that, which is kind of cool. Just, we have some characters that we left their faces blank and left the space for them to be drawn into the book.
Oh, wow. Huh. Wow, you got some really cool tiers on this. That's really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, it's fun putting together the Kickstarters, and I also want to give a shout out to Brant Fowler, who helped me just with the Kickstarter design, because design is not my strong point. So he helped me make this look as good as the books look.
Right. Wow. Cool. Look at it. You got some great pictures, great articles, great reviews for it. So
yeah.
Wow.
One that I'm really proud of is from Comic Book Men, Ming Chen. I met him when it was at Rose City, and I was first starting out. It was Rose City 2017. I didn't even have a table there. but the first book had just been delivered. So I was like, okay, I loaded up some books at Rose City. I was going around to my friends and saying, hey, guys, check this out. And Ming Chen happened to be there. So I went and saw a panel with him. And he was just like, oh, yeah, he's like, somebody asked if he was doing more signings and more interviews or talks with people, just talking with people. Because in the pamphlet for Rose City, it said he was only going to be there for like an hour. And he was doing signatures for an hour. And he's like, dude, I don't know what that is about. He said, I'm going to be at my table back in the celebrity area the entire day. So he says, just come on by, come say hi to me. And he was such a nice and down-to-earth dude. I just like, yeah, man, I just finished a comic. I don't even have a thing here. And went and showed him. He's looking through. He's like, dude, this is really good, man. And he says, yeah, when you post it up, take a picture with me holding it up. And I was like, dude, I don't expect that from you, man. And he's like, no, he's like, I really want you, like, that's just Ming's thing, is he's such a nice, down-to-earth guy. And he's like, I want to use my celebrity to help you out.
Yeah.
And I went and posted it up on Twitter and Facebook and what have you. And when I posted that up, I had just gotten the books back. The Kinetic went from nobody knowing about it at all to all of a sudden I was getting messages saying, hey, when's this book coming out? Where can we get it? We saw Ming that was sharing it.
That's awesome. Wow, this is great. So yeah, this has been a pretty quick hour, Bill. This has been good. So
yeah, it's amazing how time flies like that, man.
I know. See, so everybody, please check out kineticcomic.com. That'll bring you straight to the Kickstarter campaign. Looking to see anything else, ycomics.net. That's another place to see all of Bill's work there as well. And so, Bill, where else can they find you? Do you have like Twitter or Instagram handles?
Yes. So it's super easy to find me. On Twitter, I am ycomics, or I am Seattle_ycomics. Sorry. And on Instagram, I am ycomics.seattle.
Okay.
And I am active on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/ycomics.net. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bill. It was great talking to you, and congratulations again on getting your goal at Kickstarter. And I'm looking forward to checking out this new issue.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on.
All right, you're welcome. Coulombe, right? Coulombe.
Yeah, Coulombe. Just like spraying on cologne, but with an M and not an N.
How many times have you had to say that before?
God, all the time, man. My parents couldn't have been like Smith or Johnson or something.
Yeah, that was my last name. And sometimes what I like to do is when we like get reservations at like a restaurant, people are like, all right, last name, and I always go Smith.